Okay, to continue on in the series, so we've talked about the movement from stressing your body into adaptation recovery, and that continual ebb and flow back and forth between stressing, recovery, and that's how you incrementally improve performance, improve fitness levels. We talked about the totality of stressors that exist in your life: good and bad nutrition, menstrual cycle, events, relationships, family, money, and your training load. Something that's started to become more prevalent in the last couple of years is monitoring of HRV, heart rate variability. So this is not just the heart rate as in beats per minute. What this is between those beats, so a unique point across every heartbeat, looking at how that varies over a period of time. So usual sample size is about 60 seconds, 2 minutes, and it's examining how regular those heartbeats are versus how irregular they are. The more regular they are, generally it's seen that that's your sympathetic nervous system that is becoming more dominant rather than your parasympathetic nervous system, which allows more variation. If you're in a more stressed state, it's seen that your heartbeat and that heart rate variability is lower. So there's not as much variability in it. Now, there's a couple of links that I'll send you from a doctor who's done work and who has promoted this through HRV for training. So I'll send this as a link associated with sending out the video, and I'll put it in the description of this video. It's very worthwhile reading his material. What's stressed in it is making sure when you consider heart rate variability that you look at trends over the long term. Although I mentioned that the more your sympathetic nervous system is dominant, the more regular your heart rate is, and the sympathetic one being the one that's more associated with being in a more stressed state, what's key is actually not the absolute numbers, but the trending and the short-term versus long-term nature of that trending. So in the short term, in the acute side of things, if you were to overload one of these areas, for example, your training load, travel, you may see a very short-term change in your heart rate variability. The challenge with all of this is it varies quite dramatically day to day anyway. So when you look at some of the material that's available, you look at some of the graphs, what the app that the doctor is linked with, not promoting, but associated with, that graphing is trying to compare the daily change when you measure it versus some type of trending across a window. And that window can be your 7-day average or out to a 60-day average. And these zones are the zones which you're then trying to look at with some algorithms to determine, should you adjust your training because of a change in your heart rate variability. It's quite complicated, so it's definitely worth having a look at it. I've started to record my heart rate variability. It's done on HRV for training using the camera on the back of my mobile phone. Key is that you try and capture the data at the same point under the same conditions. So for myself, that's first thing in the morning, unstimulated by looking at emails, WhatsApp messages, lying in bed, finger over the camera on the mobile phone, record my heart rate variability. It then gets stored, and alongside that are other more subjective data points. How is my sleep? Do I have any injury? Do I feel sick? You can also capture additional data points that are personalized for you. So if you want to capture some other variable, a mood variable, some other element that you think could be beneficial for you, then you've got the option to add in a couple of your own personal data points, which you can then score or put comments against. So I've been doing this now for, I think, about 3 weeks, and it's just now starting to build up a data set that I can then use as another input to potentially how to modify my own training. It's very early days just now, both for science and for myself. Feel free to look at it. However, my advice for the group, as it currently stands, in terms of our discussions and interactions, is to use the mojo indicator here, big smiley face, unhappy face. This is much more comprehensive in terms of taking in all of the totality of these stressors, as opposed to trying to micro adjust your training based on heart rate variability as it currently stands. So I'm happy to work with each of you looking at recording this, but my advice in terms of how we adapt training is very, very much more linked back to your own mojo and your appetite for training as opposed to HRV at the moment. This may well develop over time, in which case starting to build up a pattern of your own HRV data set could be quite useful. It's something that's motivating me is to start to establish that pattern, and also the metadata I can capture alongside it, so my own additional personal data points that I'm now tracking each day, because it gets me into that routine and that habit of a couple of numbers each morning when I'm filling in the questionnaire. So that's the overview of HRV, so the heart rate variability. I'll send you the links. As I say, the summary of this is, for our coaching athlete communication, we can have it as additional data, but the stronger one at present that we should follow is looking at your appetite to train, your happiness, your motivation, and understanding what that looks like in the context of the totality of the influences that you have, and looking to see where we can adjust, whether it's goal-based motivation, whether it's diet, whether it's working through injuries, whether it's looking at getting sufficient sleep, other pressures, and adapting the training load to optimize it for your own personal circumstances. If there's appetite, I'm happy to do a Q&A on HRV, and we can do a webinar where we can talk through some more of the science, some more of the pros and cons, and some of the practicalities that I've seen using the camera-based app as well. Hope this was helpful. I've got 2 more ideas for some follow-ups as well, so stay tuned. Thank you.